All right. I think that one of the other people is going to hop on a second, and I know I got a few more gonna jump on and like probably a bit into the meeting, but I think that we can just as soon as our friend Nora gets here, we'll go ahead and start with that.
All right, no worries.
All right. I think our friend Nora's here, and so again, we'd love to just get a general sense of to start off who you are as a person.
Hi, my name is Sophie Walker. I'm an assistant public defender in Cook County, Illinois, home to Chicago and its surrounding suburbs. I've been a public defender since I got sworn in November of 2023, so it's been almost 2 years now. I went to undergrad in a couple different places. It was a struggle for me to kind of find my footing in undergrad, but so I started out at William and Mary down in Virginia. I was down there for 2 years, and that's where I first kind of dipped my toes into the study of sociology. Um, I think that for a long time I wasn't really privy to a lot of the issues that people in our country face on a daily basis, particularly surrounding the criminal justice system. And being in a sociology course, I started to realize things are a lot different than what I had grown up with and everything that I know. I ended up moving back home and going to a local school, and I started studying criminology specifically because at that point I was able to connect a lot of the societal issues that we have with the criminal justice system and how powerful it is and how prevalent it is in the lives of a lot of people. Um, I knew that I wanted to be an attorney towards the end of my time in undergrad. And so I ended up going to law school at DePaul. And at that point, when I started law school, sorry, sirens, of course. At that point, when I started law school, I knew that I wanted to do criminal defense. Um, Being a public defender, so a public defender is a criminal defense attorney who is appointed by the court when someone cannot afford an attorney. A lot of people who enter the court system cannot afford attorneys. There's a lot of links between poverty and uh, crime. And so our job is to basically show up to court every day. And when someone is eligible for a public defender, the judge will determine that themselves, whether that be through asking questions about their financial status or just asking about their employment status alone. Um, I, because I think I may have covered this because I understood the connection between crime and poverty. I really wanted to I really wanted to be a public defender. I was discouraged by a lot of people. I was told that, I shouldn't associate myself with those people, that, I'm bringing myself down to their level, that it's just not worth it. I've been discouraged in a lot of ways. Um, I, during my time at DePaul, sorry, my dog's there. During my time at DePaul, for law school, I was able to do a lot of experiential learning. They require a lot of that. When you go there, there's a certain amount of credits that you have to hit for that. And I started interning for the Cook County Public Defender's Office down in Markham, which is in the south suburbs of Chicago, and that is home to the poorest suburbs of Cook County. Um, that was probably the best experience that I've had. I think that if I hadn't been pushed to do that, if I hadn't been pushed to intern and put myself out there, then I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I was able to practice as a pre-licensed attorney, is what they call them, under a 7-Eleven license. So, under the supervision of a licensed attorney, I was able to advocate for clients in court with their permission. I did a lot of bond hearings. I did a lot of interviews with people, and I learned a lot just in the. I did that summer, and then I did that summer itself was incredible. And then I did 2 more semesters that I used for credit during my time at DePaul. Um, let's see, my day-to-day life as a public defender. I show up, court starts at 9 o'clock, and I'm there to have my own cases handled. Most of what I do is a status date. It's just an update on where we're at with discovery, where we're at with an offer. Um, and it's just your standard, that's all we're doing here. Um, Sometimes there's litigation. Litigation includes motions that we filed, doing hearings on that, and then trials as well. So we do bench trials and we do jury trials. Jury trials, all of our clients are entitled to a jury trial. That's when you pick the 12 people who get to hear all the facts, determine whether your client's guilty or not guilty. And then the bench trial is when you do in front of the judge. That sometimes is a little tricky. Sometimes you have to make a decision whether you actually trust that this judge is going to hear everything and find your client not guilty. There are some judges that you don't want to put bench trials in front of because you know how they are. So that's kind of my day to day. And then the afternoon, sometimes we have an afternoon call. But usually I'm updating my court sheets, looking at discovery, and I'm meeting with clients. That's a lot of what I do. My opinion of the US justice system. So I already did not have a great opinion of the US justice system. My personal views of it. I myself am an abolitionist of the system. I don't believe that our criminal justice system functions in a way that positively impacts anyone involved. I think it's a system that is used to oppress a lot of people. It tears apart families. It ruins people's lives. It's not a good system, in my opinion. Not everyone that I work with shares that opinion, but one of the challenges of being a public defender and having that opinion is you are having to operate within a system that you yourself don't believe in. Our hands are tied with a lot of the things that we can and can't do for our clients, and the things that our clients are, entitled to, and things like that. So that's a challenge, at least for me in particular, and my coworkers who also share those same views. What kind of person would excel? I think the kind of person that would excel at being a public defender is someone who has to not be afraid of conflict. Conflict, you can't be conflict averse here. Your entire job is conflict. When you walk into the courtroom, you're in conflict with pretty much everyone in there. Your client is up against the judge, the state, the sheriffs, the witnesses, anyone else who's in that courtroom. You're the only person who's on their side. And so you need to be comfortable with being one of the least like people in the room and being able to stand on that and defend your client's rights. You also need to be a good negotiator. A lot of what we do is negotiating down things for situations where, like, if you have a battery case and your client definitely did hit someone, but you're asking the state to maybe have some mercy and offer your client something that's not going to give them a conviction or not going to give them a background because, it was a bad situation for them. It was a bad time. They were going through something. And you need to be able to have people skills and to work with people. It's really easy to, like someone like myself who's so against the system, to walk in there and think, I'm going to step up, I'm going to stand up for my client. I'm going to, I'm not going to work with anyone. I don't want to hear anything from the state, And while they are a lot of times your enemy, you also have to work with them because they can they can make things better for your client. It's a really weird balance that you have to um, it's a really weird balance, but you have to do what's best for your client in the end. Um, let's see. The role of public defenders, people don't understand that we are actually licensed attorneys. Um, I am an attorney, I am a lawyer. I have a lot of clients who say, should I hire a lawyer? And I am an attorney. That's okay. If they want to hire someone, I'm not offended, but I am an attorney, and so I introduce myself to my clients as their attorney so that they know that I'm actually a lawyer. There's a lot of misconceptions about us, but I think they're rooted in truth a lot of the times. There have so I think historically, and there's still attorneys that practice this way, just want to plead people out and move the case along without looking at it. And I think that's really bad because our clients should have more say in what happens in their case because it is their lives. Um, I have advised clients on offers and they don't want to take it. I can't force them to plea. We have to go to trial. If they want to go to trial, that's their right. Um, and I think that it's really hard to shed those old stereotypes because there are um, there are a lot of PDs in the past who probably did plea people out without really looking at a case. I think a lot of people were negatively impacted by that. There are still people in our office like that, but for the most part, I think a lot of us are trying to change that culture of just closing out a case and moving on and not worrying about it. Or just viewing our clients as, well, they did it, so who cares? That one's a really hard one to fight because I think a lot of people can't understand how you can defend someone who's done something they believe is guilty, but um, it's their life, and yeah, we just give them advice on pleading or setting for trial, and then ultimately we make the other decisions in terms of trial and things like that. One of my favorite parts about public defending, I am so self-righteous. So I love being right and I love winning. Those are some of my favorite parts. My favorite parts are when I can just get a favorable outcome for my client. Um, just to just to have someone be on their side. Sometimes, like I said, you're the only person there. Even if they don't thank you, because sometimes they don't thank you. Sometimes they're not happy with you. Um, but I think my favorite part is just being able to be there for my clients and to go to bat for them because I'm not a great advocate for myself, but I'm a great advocate for other people. And I think that that helps me excel in this job. And yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts. There's a lot of difficulties with being a public defender. Your clients are poor; they don't have access to resources. Transportation is a huge problem. They're more likely to get warrants. They're more likely to suffer from mental health disorders. Some of your cases are people stealing because they don't have anything. Uh, Criminal trespass because they're homeless and they have nowhere to stay. Those are the biggest difficulties and frustrations because a lot of times there's nothing you can do. You can try and provide resources for people, but there's just there's just such an immense amount of poverty. And it's really tough because some of the things that your clients go through, I'm never going to have to go through some of the things that my clients have to go through on a daily basis. And it's really disheartening because they deal with a lot of difficult situations. And they make choices that maybe I wouldn't make, but I'm not in their shoes. And so you have to also kind of remove yourself from that and understand that these are things that I've never been in that situation. So I can't judge people based on that. Um, let's see, advice for those who want to go to law school. Understand that you're not just learning about one area of the law, you're learning about all of them. I had to learn about real estate transactions. I had to learn about wills and trusts. I have no interest in any of that. I don't know. I don't know anything about taxes. I don't know anything about getting a mortgage. I had to learn about that. I have no idea what goes on. That was really difficult. Um, I think you should go to law school though if you ultimately know that you want to end up litigating, especially, you should go. Litigation also is a very small part of the legal field. Like criminal defense is a very, very small niche. There are so many other different kinds of law. And so this kind of circles back to you're going to have to learn about a lot of different kinds of law. Um, but when you're in law school, I would say take risks and do an internship, you know, try something that you weren't sure about because this is the time to do it before you get into a career and you get settled and then you realize this is not what you want to do and not where you want to be stuck. Um, Law school is the time to try things out um and to yeah, just learn about what you want to do and yeah, I mean that's kind of what I gotta say about that. Opinions on restorative justice. Um, I think restorative justice is important. I think society in general sees it as a joke because of the system that we have in place right now, which is a punitive system. This system is not rehabilitative. It's not meant to repair communities. It's not meant to bring people back into the community. The system we have now is meant to punish, and it's meant to enact harm on people that have been found guilty of crimes. I don't think that that's a fair system. I think that that's uh, I don't think that that's just at all. I think restorative justice is one of those ways that we can take steps towards giving communities power in terms of how they want to make things right. We do have restorative justice courts. I'm not familiar with them. I know there are some attorneys that do it. It's a weird referral process. There's very specific types of cases that can get referred to the restorative justice program. I'm not familiar with those, and they don't typically apply to my cases. I'm typically practicing in misdemeanors. Um, Most of my cases are traffic cases. I have some batteries and some assaults and criminal trespass. But for the most part, my cases are DUIs and driving on suspended license. So those are a little harder with restorative justice. So yeah, I mean that kind of yeah, that encapsulates. I mean, I think that it's a good thing. I think it's good to give those communities power back because um, I just I just don't agree with this system. But like I said, I have to operate within it. So I think we're doing what we can. Our current public defender, Sharon, is very big on holistic defense. He's very big on getting social workers. He's very big on trying to provide more resources for our clients. And I really hope that those endeavors pay off in the long run. But that's what I have about that. But any other questions, any other discussions you guys want to ask, go for it.
Yeah, so far you've given us such great details and everything. I'd love to, just for the members, if you could talk a bit more about the actual systems of the court you work in, like, just kind of the roles, just to give, insight to people who may not be familiar with what the inside of a court looks like.
Sure. So, when you walk into a courtroom like the type that I'm in, there are traffic and criminal cases. They're all misdemeanors. So misdemeanors are divided into Class A, Class B, and Class C, and they have sentencing ranges based on each of those. Misdemeanors are all punishable by only up to a year in jail. So when you think about jail, people who are sitting in jail are the people who are either awaiting trial or are doing a sentence that's less than a year long. So everyone in my courtroom is not going to prison unless they have a pending felony matter. But it's a lot lower stakes in comparison to other cases. When you walk in, the judge is on the bench. That the judge is the one who runs the court call, basically. You have your public defenders in the room. My courtroom has four of them because we have a very heavy caseload. So there's four of us in the room there. There's two state's attorneys in there. The state's attorneys are the prosecutors. And they're the ones responsible for sending us discovery, sending us offers, and then eventually when we go to trial, prosecuting the cases in terms of litigation. You have a court reporter there. Your court reporter takes down everything you say. I was told today that I my color is red for my court reporter because I speak too quickly. And then you have your clerk. The court clerk is the person in charge of the files. You walk in, you have to check in with her if you want your case called. Your case will not get called if you don't check in with her. And what she does is after the judge calls the case, the judge will indicate on what's called a half sheet what has occurred during that call. And then the clerk will upload that into the clerk site so that it's listed on there and then given the correct next court date. You also have a deputy in the room. Ours are the Cook County Sheriff, and they're in charge. They're like whatever people want to call a bailiff, whatever kind of language they want to use for that. And they're just there to ensure that there's no safety concerns and that people are not on their phones usually. Occasionally, it's not occasionally, it's usually every other day, just about, we'll have custodies. So people who are either coming from the jail because they're being held on their case, or people who have been picked up on a warrant, or people who have a new case. And they'll be brought before the judge. And sometimes we'll have a hearing on their detention, or we'll just have the status on what's going on in their case if they're being held, and so on and so forth. When my case is called, I step up. For the record, Assistant Public Defender Sophie Walker, stepping up for my client, Mr. So-and-so, who's present for your honor in court. Judge, we're here for status on discovery. I'm not yet in receipt of paper discovery. I just inquired with the state. That's the lingo that I use pretty much every time. We get an update from the state on what's going on, and we go from there. Sometimes there are issues where discovery gets lost by the police departments, where there's no video, even though under Illinois law, they are required to have body camera active when they are speaking with suspects or speaking with alleged victims that we call complaining witnesses. And sometimes they just don't have the video. That's important for us to know if it was deleted, if it never existed. And we have to file motions based on that to suppress things. Yeah, does that answer your question on kind of my everyday in there?
Yeah, that's great, and like, we've talked a lot, about within our club of just, the, some of the a lot of these, unfair systems that get people, convicted on a lot of these things where, the details get lost in, like, kind of the ether. And it is frustrating to hear about, those instances where it's like evidence is being misplaced, whether, on purpose or accident. And very indicative of, some of the, systemic, wide issues in the system. Is there any other questions, Maidali or Nora? I know you're on
Yeah, I had a
off camera.
question.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about like the difficulties and frustrations and how it can be hard, but I was just wondering, how do you deal with, I guess, the mental toll that it might take having to do this work? Because I imagine that it's not easy, and how you kind of deal with that.
So I go to therapy, thankfully. But I think having other people who relate to you, who completely understand what you're talking about, like it's very important to me to have those close knit connections with my coworkers because we're all going through it. We all know exactly what's happening in these courtrooms and what's happening to our clients. You do have to find an outlet. I don't know if I found a proper outlet yet. It's hard. I know that it's really difficult to find a good outlet. I've been working in therapy about trying to find one of those, but uh, it is important to note that like substance abuse problems run rampant in the legal profession, especially with criminal defense, public defense. It's because it's really hard to kind of shake off a lot of what we're dealing with. And like I said, my cases are a lot of low stakes cases, but once I start practicing more in felonies, I know that it's going to be a lot heavier. You're dealing with a lot of heavy, evidence. You're dealing with, potential sentencing that, you know, someone could spend almost the rest of their life in prison. So I am not there yet. I'm not at that point. I'm hoping to be able to find a good outlet for all of those stressors, but I think it's really important to have those connections with your coworkers in particular because they get it more than anyone else, and what you're seeing and what you're dealing with.
Cool. Oh, Nora has a question.
I know. Thanks for putting your hand up.
Hi, Sophie. First of all, thank you so much for coming to this meeting. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Mhm.
Sorry. A lot of the Books of Prisoners members definitely resonate with your cause. A lot of us, I'm sure, are fellow abolitionists for prisons because of the system that it's just very, very flawed. So I really appreciate you coming in today. Just in general, we've got a lot of people who want to get involved with the justice system, a lot of pre-law individuals. How can they get involved in general, or specifically with you, to help, fighting the cause?
So our office does internships for law students. I think that's my understanding is that it's just for law students. We have an application process. The Cook County Public Defender in particular has really taken off in the last few years. I think we had hundreds of people apply for the internship recently, which was not the case when I started interning in 2022. So I think there's been a huge, I guess, jump in people wanting to be public defenders, which is great because there's a lot of poor people who are being accused of crime. Um, in terms of getting involved, I think honestly, like it's kind of tough. I think you're always welcome to come observe court. Court is open. Sometimes people can be a little hostile about having observers there, but you're always welcome to come in and watch. I think programs like your guys is really cool. I think what you guys do is really great. I think reaching out to, I know there are a lot of organizations out there that help our clients. It's just, it's tough when you're not in law school to actually get involved with our office because of how it operates and because we are with the county. Um, they're very rigorous in terms of, you know, their application process for everything. And like submitting your application to even be an intern. So I think showing up to court or like you guys can reach out to me. You can have my contact information about coming into shadow or like sitting on Zoom one day and just watching what unfolds in court, and just getting an idea of how things work on a day-to-day basis. But getting involved, I think, is a little more difficult. But um, interning is a great way to do it. I loved interning there. I did not know how far Markham was from the city because I was living in the South Loop at the time and I didn't have a car and it took me a long time to get to 165th and Kedzie. But I think interning is the best way to do it. Uh, Public defense is not financially rewarding. That's the other thing. So anything of public interest is not going to make you money. So you're not going to get paid as an intern as well. So you just need to be prepared for that. Keep an eye out for like scholarships and things like that. I did a scholarship. I was able to apply for a scholarship from DePaul when I interned in 2022 for that summer. And I think it was just around $2,000 just for the summer, which is not nearly enough. But yeah, I encourage you to get involved. I wish I had more options for that. But you know, um, keep, I mean, you guys are on the right track already, really. I mean, being a part of a club like this, I think you guys already have a good idea of how the system is and how it works. Um, yeah, yeah. I know that wasn't a very helpful answer. I'm sorry, but um, is that, do you have more questions based on that?
I'm interested in one, like, do you have any like, are there any like, current deliberations within the legal system right now that you feel are important to like, focus on regarding, the protecting, the the rights of people and like, that might, impact the justice in a some like just how we operate within the justice system right now?
I don't keep tabs on the appeal cases. I kind of know what's going on in the news lately. I think our clients are losing their rights in a lot of ways. Based on a recent Supreme Court ruling, which basically allows brown people to be just arrested for no reason, is like by the feds, is crazy. Um, that's just a violation on so many levels, and I am afraid that that will seep into state level. Maybe not in Illinois. Um, our law enforcement has been instructed not to aid any federal agents in that way, specifically with immigration officers. That's been a law that's been in place pre-Pritzker. That's just been a standard. What's actually interesting as well is our local law enforcement, I based on my interactions with our deputies, seems to feel like their toes are being stepped on when the federal agents are involved. And so they've actually been comfortable telling me when they think that there's federal agents that might be coming to the courthouse or things like that because they don't like that their toes are being stepped on. I know that that's maybe a little tangential to that, but I think that's one of my biggest worries is that. But our office now has a policy team, and so they were very pivotal in the enacting or ending the cash bail system, which has helped a lot of people. I think it's been very helpful in releasing people from jail who just couldn't afford to get out, who were given a D bond. If you guys aren't familiar with the old system, I did bond court a lot when I was an intern, so I was there before the new system went into place. Um, there's technically three different kinds of bonds, but there were two primarily that we dealt with, which is the I bond and then the D bond. The I bond is a recognizance bond. They usually set it at $10,000. The $10,000 meant nothing. It was just an I bond. You would get released. You didn't have to post anything. Okay. Then the D bond, you would have to post 10% of whatever the D bond was. Then these were based on the proffer from the state at the bond hearing. These were based on your criminal history. And these were based on, your ties to the community, whatever they wanted to call them. So um, they issued these D bonds. So I would have clients who got like a $10,000 D bond. In order to get out, they would have to post $1,000. A lot of people were staying in jail just because of that. The new system has changed. The new system has changed because nonviolent offenders are able to get out pretty easily. The only way that nonviolent offenders are able to be held is when they pick up a subsequent Class A misdemeanor or higher. So if they're out for a retail theft case, they pick up a subsequent retail theft case while they're out on pretrial release. Their pretrial release can be revoked. We'll have a hearing on it sometimes. It's up to the state's discretion to file those, but they can actually be held for picking up two retail thefts. So that system has changed a lot. However, we're seeing a lot more of our domestic clients being held, which isn't great because the judges are holding them in situations where maybe they shouldn't be held just because they want to protect themselves based on the media and the way that people, the way that things happen with particularly domestic violence in the media. And so they're less likely to release people when arguably they should be released, even, when these allegations are sometimes flimsy. Yeah, so that was a more extensive thing about our policy team, but our policy team worked to change the language around unlawful use of a weapon to now unlawful possession of a weapon. Personally, I think that's just semantics. I don't think that really changes much. I think that's just a language issue. I think that one of our next things should really be changing laws about discovery because we are only entitled to discovery through case law, and case law can be overruled at any time. And maybe looking into a statutory type of law.
what does that exactly mean that like, you're trying to gain like a further access to like, like a cemented discovery?
So discovery is all the evidence that they're going to have against your client. And it's not always against your client. There are things that maybe things that your client has said that works for you and like helps your case more. So it's anything that's been collected in the investigation of your client in the incident that occurred allegedly. So all of the laws regarding discovery, I think in misdemeanors in particular, are I can't say for sure because I don't know for sure, but my understanding is that it's mostly based on case law. Case law is not set in stone because it can be overruled when a case comes up on appeal. So when you talk about Supreme Court decisions, like you hear about cases that came all the way up from the appellate level, was appealed all the way up, that's case law. That's not statutory. That's not, I guess you would say, written law. Um, it's something that can be changed just based on whoever is hearing the case, whoever is making that decision. And so we think that it would be a better system to have just that it's a statute, and that it would be much harder to change or appeal.
All right. Any further questions?
I had one small question.
Mhm.
I know you were talking a little bit about how you're only working with like misdemeanor cases. In the future, do you want to deal with like maybe more heavier cases, like cases with felonies or and stuff? Is that something you want to do, or are you looking to just stay with what you're doing for now?
Yeah. So the way that our office works is when you join our office, you get placed typically in misdemeanors. So you start off with the misdemeanor caseload, really. Um, that's kind of where you're at maybe for the first year or so, and then you can move up to felonies. I help out on felony cases, so what's called second chairing. So I'm getting the experience, but it's not my case personally. I am someone who is very hesitant to go for those cases, so I have the ability to take on some felony cases, but I don't feel that I have a full grasp on my misdemeanor cases yet, and I want to make sure that I fully understand those before I start going into felony cases. Like I said, the stakes are higher for your clients, and I don't want to go in unprepared. But yeah, just the way that our office functions is that you're placed in the misdemeanors first. If you were a practicing attorney on your own or at a different firm, you would probably be representing people on those felonies right away. But the way that our office works is you kind of get you know, get used to your surroundings, get the phrase, I can't remember the phrase off the top of my head, but you get used to everything, you get accommodated to things, and then you move up from there. A lot of what we do is learning on the job. I Most of what I learned in law school does not apply. I Except for criminal procedure, which is um just kind of the rights that your client has, rights that people have regarding like Miranda rights and things like that, Fourth Amendment things. But everything else I learned while practicing. And that's why I'm so grateful for my internship, because I was able to have a lot of that experience before I even started practicing as an attorney.
Do you recommend do you have any thoughts about how people should maybe shift their thinking regarding the people that you're working with every day for like the defendants and such?
Yeah, I think as much as people are, presumed innocent until proven guilty, there's a I everyone assumes that they're guilty immediately. I think that people also need to understand that just because you did, and this, just because you did something doesn't mean you're guilty. I have won DUI trials where my client was drunk, but they weren't guilty of a DUI under the law. So there's that reasonable doubt standard. And that really helps us. So I've had conversations with judges after trials where they found my client not guilty of a DUI, but they were like, wow, that guy was drunk. So changing the idea of like, okay, well, someone's done this, but they're not guilty, or, I think labeling people as criminals is just an easy way to just disrespect people and to kind of toss them away or to the side. I think our society is just so hard on people when they can't get it right and when they make mistakes. And a lot of the time, I think it's out of their control. I think they're dealing with a lot more than what the average person would be dealing with. Um, Poverty plays a huge role in how people make decisions. A lot of my clients have mental health problems, whether that's because they were poor or what made them poor. A lot of people that I deal with are really down their luck. They're at their worst times a lot of the time. So I think people need to have more grace and understanding. I think prosecutors are shifting towards that. I think that the system should just go away entirely because it's not a just system. It was not created to be just. It was created to be punitive. But operating within that, I think that people need to have more understanding of what actually happens in people's lives.
Again, thank you so much for talking with us. You've given us so much great information. Any final questions?
No, I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for coming, Sophie, and giving. I learned a lot. And a lot of it, I'm actually taking a media law class. It's like my first law class I've taken, and a lot of it is relevant. So it's really interesting to learn more. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'll go to law school. It's a lot of money, but go to law school.
Definitely just extending my gratitude. This has been a really nice chat. Thank you so much.
Of course, yeah. If you guys want my contact information, you can ask Kira for it. She has my number. She knows how to find me.
Yeah, I'll definitely, like spreading the word about, the shadowing and like, again, just being able to go into court and witness some of the stuff with your eyes. Like, I shadowed Sophie a few
You
weeks
didn't get
before
to see
school
that much, yeah.
started. And even like with what I did see, just, it's one thing talking about a lot of the, like, theories regarding, the criminal justice system, but, being there on the front lines and, is an entirely different matter. And it's just why, I have so much respect for public defenders and especially for you. And again, we
All
really
right, whatever. Yeah.
appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. I mean, if you guys have any other questions, yeah, reach out to me. Um, I have a jury trial coming up in December. I think you guys are probably still in school, but I have that coming up. We'll see if that goes. But yeah, it's a it's a fun job, I'll tell you. People love to hear about it, and I
All
love to
right.
talk.
I think we'll